So we're doing video 4 now. I did not change or anything. I'm still here. Same day. So I said, why not? I had the study ready. So excited to jump into this topic. Okay, so the point of today's topic is Israel. I just want to cover it as broadly as possible because oftentimes what you find is you see a lot of Christians get into a situation where they're like saying, well, are the Jewish people today actually the true Israel, or are they, are these people really, they'll say something along the lines of, is the secular state of Israel actually like in a in a relationship with God? And I think people can have suspicion. I think suspicion is good generally, but you don't want to be suspecting too much to the point where you're inadvertently calling God a liar. I think that's not a good thing. uh, and why do I say that? Because God, basically, and this is what we're going to talk about today, Israel and God restoring the Jewish people into a state is it's so consistent with the Bible. It's crazy. I was thinking the last few days about, like, what are other parallels, similar to God restoring Israel to, with their own autonomy and having their own state, other than this promise, other than this prophecy. What else is equivalent to it? You know Maybe a close second will be that there's going to be an end times generally, and that God is going to rule the nations. That's a close second, but that should tell you how consistent throughout the Bible God is about restoring Israel. And here's, look, guys, it's a very straightforward thing. If we say that this Israel is not the Israel of the Bible, then we're making God a liar, because God's been saying for 3,000 years 4 things. And by the way, the scripture for today, we're picking 2 chapters, Deuteronomy 28 through 30. But the promises that you see in those 2 chapters are 4 things. First, I am going to bring you into this land, the land of Canaan, what some people call Palestine, what some people call Eretz Israel, or land of Israel. God is saying, you could, in spite of what you do or don't do, I'm going to grant you this land. Now, the second thing is, I know that you will mess up. He's saying this to Moses, and in no light way. He said, Moses said, with me being here, you guys are so stubborn. I already know you guys are going to mess up the moment I die. So, God knew that Israel was going to fall short. And so the first promise is, I'm going to bring you into that land. The second promise is, you will mess up and you will fall short. You will, break your covenant with me, because I'm not breaking it, but you are, because you're going to be idolatrous. You're going to do what all the other nations are doing. And I'm going to bring you out of that land. I'm going to throw you into the hands of your enemies. And if you read, I'm talking about details, guys, you will, just horrific things of you will be set ablaze by the enemy, by your enemies. Just siege, famine, exile, all the things that happened to Israel, not just when the Babylonians came or the Assyrians came. They continue to happen to Israel throughout their history. And God is saying, the second thing God said is, because you fell short and because you did not honor my covenant, I'm going to turn you over to your enemies. And so the third thing is, you're going to be scattered globally. He's saying that, look, guys, I know that there's someone here who's saying, it's kind of a cynic thing to say, well, they were promised that land 3,000 years ago, yeah, they were promised that land, and guess what? They're back in it, So if your posture is just to mock Scripture and to mock the fact that All these things were, Israel had not even entered the land of Israel when this was being said. You know, Israel was in a situation where they had been so rebellious in the desert for 40 years that God made sure that, none of the people that came out of Egypt actually got into the land of Israel, because they were in such rebellion with God, against God, that that ultimately God said, you know what, because of your disbelief, you're not, there's no way I'm letting you into the promised land. Only Caleb and Joshua. And so the rebellion and removal of the Jewish people from the land of Israel was prophesied before it happened. That ought to tell you that we're the Jewish people that we know through history, that were diaspora all over the world, like, that's the same Jewish people that we were talking about for 3,000 years, or 3,000 years ago, that Moses was saying, hey, because of your rebellion, God is going to scatter you across the globe. Now, guys, I want you to look at a map. I think I have a map here, but because of the setup, it's probably not it's not gonna work. But look, I want you to go into a map, look at Jerusalem in the map, and I just want you to scroll all the way up, and go as north as possible from Jerusalem. And you should hit, at some point, you should hit Ukraine, you should hit Russia. For all of those that think Ashkenazi Jews are not really Jews because they're a little lighter and have a different history. Than let's say the rest of the Jews in comparison. I want you to do another experiment. I want you to go from Jerusalem and go all the way down, scroll down. And you should see Mecca and Medina and Yemen. And I want you to go west of Jerusalem. So just scroll, depending on your screen. I'm kind of dyslexic at this point. But you should start to see Rome and Spain. And I want you to go east from Jerusalem. And you should see Iraq, and you should see Iran, and you should see India, and you should see China. Why did I make you do this? And why did I take time to say this? You should expect to see Jews in the four corners of the earth, because God promised. This is the thing. When look, let me tell you something, guys. Evangelicals, you can think we're crazy, okay? You can think we're crazy because, a good portion of us actually are. No. You can think we're crazy because we take the Bible literally. I understand that. But you get in my shoes. Like, you have Deuteronomy 28, 29, and 30, 28:64, where God is saying, I will scatter you from one end of the earth to the other. Guys, we didn't even know about the Western Hemisphere when this was taking place. When Moses was writing this down, like, you have to get in our shoes as evangelical Christians who take a literal interpretation of the scripture in this, because, guys, like, we were talking about a Jewish diaspora, thousands of years before they even got into the land, before they even fell into rebellion, before the Babylonians and the Romans ever dispersed the Jewish people. God was already saying, hey, all four corners of the earth I'm sending you to all four corners of the earth. And I mean, it was tied to their sin, true, but the prophecy kind of stands alone in spite of the sin. So he's talking about an extended period of time where the Jewish people, the Jewish nation, the Israelites that were about to cross the Jordan River into the promised land, those same Israelites were going to be sent to all four corners of the earth. Guys, this is probably a bigger sign than Israel becoming a state, because when we read Deuteronomy, you find that God wanted the Jewish people to be a light unto the nations. A very explicit purpose. But how could they be a light unto the nations unless the nations got to interact with them? They were just this group of families, that were former slaves in Egypt, and they were kind of just not necessarily feeling all too confident in themselves being in the desert. And now they were going to be sent through all four corners of the earth, and they were going to be so noticeable, and God was going to, beam out of them light unto the nations, and they were going to become so memorable. And nothing, guys, that we see today of the Jewish people had been fulfilled yet. And so this is absolutely critical to understand, because when we talk about Israel and why God has this everlasting covenant with them, it's precisely for this, because He said on the third promise is like, I will scatter you through all of the earth, and so today you can see the Jewish diaspora from Babylon to Rome to Ethiopia to China is a fulfillment of a very specific prophecy. And so the last point number 4, is the return will be complete, supernatural and prosperous than ever. Deuteronomy 1 through 10 is very clear. This is the whole point of being a stranger throughout the whole world. God makes an unconditional promise. He says, I will gather Israel from every nation where He drove them to, and He will bring them back to the land. That, by the way, when this was being written, they hadn't even been into the land yet. Okay, they were they were hovering outside of modern day Israel. And then God says, I'll bring them back to this land and increase them more than their fathers. God adds that He would make them abundantly prosperous and their livestock, crops, and offspring. Now, folks, evangelical Christians, and I'm going to cover this at some point because I think people get the wrong idea of evangelical Christians. They think, we're just the newest, like the newest brand of Christianity. And it's not quite accurate in the sense that, the way we read Scripture is based on kind of letting the Scripture come to you and reading it for what it says, and just not putting what you want into it, but just reading for what, in this case, God is saying. The modern state of Israel and the ingathering of Jews there are from 100 different nations. I mean, Israel today, the secular state of Israel is, probably, I can't think of a smaller state probably with the same, level of wealth, defense capabilities. Let's put that aside. Just research capabilities, medical capabilities, agricultural capabilities. Half of the country is in a desert. This is not to praise or worship Israel, as some detractors of Israel in Christianity and outside of Christianity would like evangelicals to make us out to be. No, there's no need to worship. We only worship God. But guys, this is prophecy. This part of the Bible, Deuteronomy 28 through 30, God was saying this when nothing of what He was saying had been fulfilled yet. They hadn't even conquered the land yet. And He's laying out to them, this is going to be your identity. Your identity is going to be your journey. And your journey is going to be 4 different stages. You're going to conquer. You're going to be kicked out because you're stubborn, because you decided to go on and do what the nations around you were doing. So I'm going to kick you out. And I'm going to send you to all 4 corners of the earth. I'm going to spread you around the earth. And then I'm going to make you return to this land. And you're going to come from all the nations. And we see that today. Now, evangelicals, we've been saying this for 100 years, okay? Since before the establishment of the secular state of Israel that you see today, okay? We've been saying it for 100 years. I'm 30. I grew up hearing people preach about this because we were so amazed on an astronomical level how this fulfillment took place. Look, I didn't think, I don't, if I had money to bet, I would not have bet that God would have used secular communists to reestablish the state of Israel. Those two things in my mind would have never, would have never come across. Okay. But here's what I want to do with this channel. I want you to get in the habit of accepting, because I have to accept this also, that God's ways are higher than ours, and his ways are not our ways. What he is able to do things that wouldn't even cross our imagination. And I'm not here to give you a step-by-step guide to prophecy. This is not what this is. I don't want your money. I don't care about the politics of it. Matter of fact, I know Israel and Iran are in the news. For all I care, I do care. Iran shouldn't have a nuclear weapon, but putting that aside, if they did or didn't, that wouldn't affect prophecy, because what God has already set in motion is way, way above us, And so I say this because as we go and understand more about the Israel that, conquered, was kicked out, was sent into diaspora, and now has reconstituted itself, as we learn more about this Israel, we're going to have to leave a part of our imaginations open to what God is doing. This scripture, guys, the Bible, it's living, all right? It is alive and it is active. Nothing that we do or stop doing is going to impede what God has already set in motion, especially in terms of his return and the judgment of nations. So, again, I'm getting to minute 17, so I need to cut it short here. But these are the 4 prophecies we're going to focus on. And guys, like I said at the beginning of the video, Israel, like the amount of prophecies, if we literally took all the prophecies of what God said to Abraham, Moses, Jeremiah, Isaiah, Amos, Ezekiel, Daniel, if we made a list, and not even talking about the New Testament, if we made a list of all the things that God said about restoring Israel, we'd be here all day. Quite literally. I picked the first 4 so we could have a quick identification of who we're talking about and, the history of this people. But it is short from being fully fulfilled, and it is quite active in our time. So I'll leave this with you. We're going to do a 5th video here shortly, and we're going to focus on the kind of one of the things I said in the previous video of God's kingdom does not know decrease. It only knows increase. And we're going to talk about the Israelite identity, both in the Old and in the New Testament. So stick around, and God bless you.